Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to give you guys all my day one discoveries for the Lake of Kalandra league mechanic. So there's quite a lot to this league mechanic, more than meets the eye, and it's a pretty interesting one to play around with, and I think the difference between someone who has all the knowledge about it and someone who doesn't and is just clicking random pieces is so drastic that it's pretty crazy. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the reception of Lake of Kalandra has been a little bit chilly, and I completely understand it. It's got insanely ramping difficulty and rewards which really super depend on how you configure your lake. Without the correct configuration, you can expect to get very poor rewards in an endgame scenario or even a mid-game scenario. So first of all, I did get quite a little bit of currency going with my Lake of Kalandra. I'm not kind of really going too hard on currency this time because I'm trying to, just figure out the league mechanic. But overall, I've managed to get some pretty good gear. We're getting into the high reds, and we're getting into our Eater Worlds and XR coming up here, and it's been pretty fun on stream, despite having a bit of a rough league start. Anyway, so how did I make my currency to, buy, like wands, 6 link, all that sort of stuff like that from Lake of Kalandra, which is what I've been exclusively pretty much doing. All right, so the first thing that I want to point out is that, as I discussed in an earlier video, Lake of Kalandra is actually very good for Chaos Recipe. So the Chaos Recipe is obviously, not too bad in the early game, and it can earn you some pretty good currency, especially with the Divine Orb being the primary currency now, and it not being too insanely expensive compared to how expensive an Exalt is. It's pretty similar. So you can, get some pretty good cash with that. Now, if you compare it to Endless Heist, maybe it's like a little bit weaker than that, but you get to run maps and do stuff like essences at the same time. So I actually think it's a reasonably competitive option. All right, so what's the deal with the Chaos Recipe? How are you going to do it? So overall, there are 3 or 4 or 5, main tiles, mainly 4 tiles that I want to talk about here, and they are the reflections of Storm, Brutality, Frost, and Flame. Now, these are the most common tiles that you will be able to place on your lake, and when you place them down and encounter them in the lake, you'll get a random monster encounter, which is just packs of monsters, and you just slay them, and then a chest comes out of the lake. Now, that chest has a chance to be armor, weapon, jewelry, currency, scarab, map, or divination. Those are the ones that I have run into, and it's got a pretty interesting breakdown of ratios. So you're most likely to get armor, weapon, and jewelry. You can also get the generic reward. Sorry, I'll add that in there, and you can pretty often get currency. Those are the main ones you can expect from these tiles from my experience so far. And these are the tiles that I used to do the Chaos Recipe. They give you an obscene amount of rares in terms of armor, weapons, and jewelry, and you can definitely expect to get a lot for your Chaos Recipe. But how do you get so much loot from the lake, Grimro? I get 1 alchemy orb. How do you get that? Okay, so let me explain the main mechanic of the lake. So you've got the entrance here, and if I was to place a reflection of the storm right here, and complete it in the Lake of Kalandra by slaying the encounter and opening the chest, I would get a singular reward, redemption from that reflection of the storm. And the reason I'm going to get a singular redemption of that reward is because it's 1 distance from the entrance. Now, we've just done some basic testing, but it seems that it's exactly a linear scaling in terms of the loot that you get based on the distance from the entrance. So if I was to put that reflection of the storm here at 2 and I got the currency reward, I would get 2 currency rewards instead of 1, instead of I placed it here. And similarly, if I was to put the reflection of the storm 3 away from the entrance, I would get 3. So what is a currency reward for in this circumstance? So when you open up one of the chests at the lake after completing it, like this currency chest for example, you could get a pile of fusings, you could get a pile of alchemies, a pile of vials, or chaos, or whatever. And if you were to do the 2 difficulty, you have 2 chances at getting 2 different piles. Now, sometimes this can be a little bit confusing because you get 1 pile even though it's 2 difficulty, but it's just because it combined the currency. Like you could have got jewelers twice and it would have given you a bigger stack of jewelers. So that's basically how it works. Now, as you increasingly improve the size of your board and the distance away from the center of the lake, you'll notice that you stop getting linear increases increases, and that's because it doesn't continually. So if you do like 16 like kind of distance, you're not going to get 16 currency rewards. It starts doing different things with that distance difficulty modifier. It'll actually start improving the rewards within the chest instead of just giving you higher quantity. A good example of this is with the armor chest. So you start getting like tons of armor, you'll get like 7 or 8 pieces of armor, or like 7 or 8 pieces of jewelry, like as you start getting deeper and deeper, but then even more deeper, and you'll start getting stuff like fractured jewelry, or like, you know, jewelry which is like corrupted, or, you know, stuff along those lines, is what it starts giving you. And this is a similar story with the currency. You'll start getting like bigger stacks, and more rare currency. That is at least my experience so far. So what have we learned here? We've learned that distance from the entrance of the lake is absolutely the only thing you need to care about when it comes to rewards. One distance is going to be an absolute joke of a difficulty and also reward. It's basically almost worth skipping at that point because it's just so bad in terms of rewards. But as you start to get deeper into the lake, well, the rewards start to scale linearly, and they start to get very, very good. It's literally like triple rewards just for going 3 tiles away from the entrance, which is a pretty interesting way to balance it, but that's just the way it works. Obviously, you can manipulate the lake very, very easily with all of the manipulation tiles, and it makes it so that you can get very, very long lakes, which is, you know, what we're aiming for here, to get the most loot. Alright, so in terms of loot, I actually have gotten a pretty decent chunk so far. I'd say I'd probably gotten 2 to 3 divines worth of loot from the actual lake. I have gotten a raw divine drop from the lake as well, from a currency chest, and I haven't really been trying to push it too hard, which is going to change. I'm going to push it very hard coming in the few days now, in the next few days now. All right, so we've talked about the distance, we've talked about the generic tiles. Let's talk a little bit more about the league tiles, which is the main occurrence of, you know, kind of juicy, cool stuff, which you can do with the Lake of Kalandra. So the rare tiles are going to be stuff like the Breach tile, the Legion tile, the Beyond tile. The league tiles are the rarer ones, and they are definitely the more rewarding ones. So initially, I thought that the league tiles would basically just be like, you rock up, and you pick an expedition tile for, right? Well, you're gonna have to like blow up the expedition, and it'll just be like an expedition in maps. That is not the case. When you do something like an expedition tile, you actually have a special little expedition encounter, and that expedition encounter has like expedition monsters. It's got an expedition mini boss, and they like drop artifacts, and the expedition mini boss is guaranteed to drop artifact reroll tokens, which is pretty interesting because when you roll the expedition tile over here, it's gonna tell you what faction it's from. So I'll just give you an example. On day 1, I rolled a Black Scythe expedition, and I was like, okay, this is pretty interesting, and I decided to put it at the end, or close to the end of my current lake, and I did it, and I went over there, and I got a bunch of the Black Scythe reroll currency, but in addition to that, off of the mini boss, I got 4 exotic coins, which is pretty good. I sold those exotic coins for 16 chaos, which was pretty nice early on in the league, and they can go up to, you know, 7 or 8 chaos later on in a league, which is pretty interesting. And you're pretty much guaranteed to get this reroll currency because I've done more expeditions since, and there's never been an expedition mini boss that I've killed which hasn't dropped a reroll currency, which is pretty cool, which, you know, I'm a big fan of that. So overall, that one was a particularly good one, and furthermore, I would always recommend doing Expedition and putting it at the very end of your chain if you can do it and it's possible, if it's Black Scythe or Knights of the Sun, because, you know, those reroll currencies are worth a considerable amount, and you can start to get quite a bit of currency from your lake, which is pretty nice. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about a couple of the other league mechanics, which have been a bit stand out for a lot of people. The next one is Beyond. If you get the Beyond encounter and you're able to do it, it's quite difficult, and you put it reasonably late in your league, on your lake, sorry, you can get a bunch of stuff like Tainted Fusings, Tainted Chromatics, and, you know, you basically get a pretty good Beyond encounter, which gives you some good tainted currency, which can be worth quite a bit of currency, which can be pretty good. And the final one I'll talk about here is Breach. Now, I'm not entirely sure because I haven't done too many breaches. I've just done one, and I didn't get the specific encounter that was described by my chat, but many people were reporting getting full breach stones from the breach encounter, which is pretty good. You know, obviously it's pretty sweet. And, you know, we need more testing. It's day 1, right? I haven't got all the answers here, but I can tell you for sure those 3, you may get some juicy you know, kind of juicy encounters there, and you may have something which is pretty interesting to try out. Now, I've only seen a few league mechanics. I haven't seen them all yet, and I have also got some information about the manipulation of the board size, as well as the choices and the rerolls here. But first of all, there's one extra tile that I want to talk about here, and this is probably the most impactful. You can actually get higher tiers of the generic reflections here. So you can see I have reflection of the storm here, but you can get an embellished reflection of the storm, which gives you, it's got like little kind of like divots here, which will be a harder encounter. And as I described earlier, the chest in question, which comes up out of the lake, that has like, generic rewards, currency, armor, and stuff like that. Well, these embellished ones have vastly superior rewards. These ones pretty much always have divination cards, or they have like currency, or in some cases I've gotten scarabs as well. Now, why is this interesting? Well, we were talking about how the rewards scale linearly. So if you put one of those embellished reflections far away from the entrance, you could get like 11 divination card rewards. It's like 7 or 8 stacked decks, a bunch of different random divination cards, or you could get 7 or 8 scarabs, which is pretty damn good, okay? And you're getting like currency very, very high amounts of the time, and it's definitely a much, much stronger pick. So if you get those embellished reward ones, I would also put those far away from the entrance of the lake. Specifically those, I think those are very, very good in terms of currency returns on Trade League. Right up there with Expedition, I'm a big fan of that one. All right, let's talk about a little bit of the min-maxing on the board size and also these reroll tokens. So the board size seems to be based off of the difficulty of the maps that you are running. So initially, I obviously got into League and everyone, and you get 3x3 in the acts. Then when you get into white and yellowish maps, you're going to start getting 4x4. And I went up into red maps, and I was kind of testing it out in red maps, and I determined that it was very hard in red maps. But I did notice that doing red maps increased the size of my board, and I was running on a 4x5 then. And now since then, I've decided to come back to white maps to kind of test a bit more stuff and mess around with the mechanic a little bit more. And now my board has actually shrunk back to a 4x4, which is pretty interesting. And overall, I'm just gonna have to assume that it's based on the map tier that you are running. That's at the time, and that's going to determine how big your next lake is going to be in terms of size, which is pretty weird. I would have thought that you could unlock the 5x5 and then come back to white maps and kind of farm it up, but that does not seem to be the case. It seems to be retroactively changing size based on the kind of difficulty of the content that you are running. Okay, so moving on. Let's talk about these. These are probably the biggest factor in determining the quality and quantity of loot from your lake. And most people, I don't think I've seen anyone talking about it, because I didn't even think to talk about it until after I messed around with the Lake of Kalandra a little bit more off stream, and kind of really tried to have a hard think about how this thing could be good. Okay, so the first thing I want to say is that if you are taking a look at these, it actually tells you how to unlock these. Now you can see I haven't done a very good job with that, have I? Because I didn't know this until I sat down and actually just looked at everything. Okay, so you can see here that this first option, reroll the list with a new set of rewards. When you're trying to fish for stuff like Expedition, Breach, Beyond, and the embellished reward tiles, well, this is, obviously a pretty good one to get. And you can get these by doing a specific reflection encounters. So you can see here it says complete a reflection with essences at difficulty 6 or more to unlock. So if I did that, then I would be able to get an additional reroll. Now these actual tokens are pretty interesting because you get these for every Lake of Kalandra you do. So if I have 3 rerolls unlocked, every lake I do, I'll get 3 free rerolls, which is very, very potent and allows you to really get some better rewards, which is pretty cool. Similarly, you get 3 of these skip. I don't think this is actually that good because I don't see why you would ever want to skip placing a tile and slow down making your lake, but I digress, it's there. If you want to use it, you can, but I'm not the biggest fan of this one. And by far and away, the most important thing to do if you want to run this league mechanic is unlock the Exile of Reflections. This is absolutely, definitely insane, I gotta say. If you want to run the mechanic and you don't have 3 of these, you need to get them ASAP. That is your #1 priority. And the reason for that is you can exile a elemental tile. So let's say I exile this Reflection of Storm, right? The elemental tiles, the Storm, Physical, Frost, and Flame are by far and away the most common tiles that you will get. It's overwhelming. It's 70 to 80% of tiles will be the Reflection of Storm, Frost, and Brutality or whatever, right? If you exile one of them, they will no longer be in the pool. You will get no generic low tier tier physical ones from then on. The chaos one is also present, but that one doesn't seem to be as common as the other 4, which is pretty good. So if you think of like stuff like sextant blocking when you're rolling the sextants, or any of those kind of mechanics, it's very, very similar to that. Imagine the most common, 3 of the most common tiles, and then you just remove them for every single Lake of Kalandra you do. Well, you are going to get vastly superior rewards to someone who has them in the pool. And the way that Path of Exile's kind of chance system works is, say that you have like 6,000 chance to roll a tile, right? There's 6,000 weight on all the tiles. I would probably guess that 4,000 of that weight is actually the reflection of the elemental ones. That's how common they are, and removing 3,000 weight of the rolls from the actual pool of like the bucket of things that it can choose is incredibly powerful. That is really good. Now, when you do this, it's going to remove all of the base tiles of like physical, for example. You can still get the higher tier ones, which are going to give you the divination, the currency, and stuff like that guaranteed, which is super duper good. Which is basically just means that this is an absolute mandatory effect. Now, unlocking these is, you know, actually pretty difficult. You have to complete the encounter. So for example, if you were to do a legion on 8, you have to pop the pylon and slay all the monsters from the pylon. It seems to be the vibe. And if you were to do beyond, well, you have to kill the beyond mobs and the boss, if there's a boss, at 10 or higher, which is, you know, definitely a bit challenging. But yeah, prioritize this. And you know, kind of try and get these unlocked, and then block out, I would say, lightning, frost, and flame. Block them out, just get rid of them instantly. All right, so that's going to be where we've got on the day 1 discoveries for Lake of Kalandra. I am adjusting my course. Initially, I was going to do Eldritch Altars and, you know, try and farm everything up there and, you know, just get a mage blood and stuff like that. But that is not what I'm going to do anymore. I am readjusting course. I think it's going to be much more useful for me to try and figure this lead mechanic out for everybody else and, you know, run it in like lower tier maps, see how profitable it can be, you know, try and combine it with other mechanics and see if we can try and get this to a place in which people can make some currency early on in the league with it. You know, I think that that's fine, and I think that's probably the best way to really help people enjoy the mechanic. And if they end up buffing it, I think that it could be one of the more rewarding things that we've seen in recent times, because I think when you're doing all of the stuff which I've described in this video, and then you're kind of running the lakes at a reasonable pace, and you're not getting absolutely farmed in high tier maps by them, well, you know, we have some potential here. I think it could be pretty interesting. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and you come check out the stream. I'm also going to have a highlight video of day 1 coming up. Hopefully you guys check that out as well. I think it could be fun, and let me know what you think of that kind of content. So until next time, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.